So first, I will introduce to you Professor Akihiro Harada. Dr. Harada is a professor in the Department of Cell Biology in Graduate School of Medicine, Osaka University. Do you know where is Osaka City? Osaka City is one of the big cities in Japan. There are Tokyo, there are Nagoya, Kyoto, Hiroshima, and Osaka, one of the big cities in Japan. And Osaka University also one of the biggest university in Japan. So we will very happy to have you, Professor Harada. So first, I'd like to extend my pleasure to have you here and welcome to Jakarta. It's the first time for you to visit us, and hopefully we can have mutual collaboration between us in this university and in Osaka University. Professor Harada is working in the Department of Cell Biology. He investigates the two things to gain insight into the mechanism of the vectorial transport and the mechanism of the pathogenesis of human dementia. It covers two main topics. The first topic is mechanism of cell polarization, and the second topic is generation and analysis of model mice for human dementia. So very interesting for you who is interested in dementia and other neuronal diseases or other degenerative diseases. You can ask many things related to this to Professor Harada. And Professor Harada will give a lecture around 1 hour maybe or less. 1 hour, and then we can continue with the discussion. So please listen to her lecture carefully. If you don't know, you can raise your hand. If you need a translator, you can ask him. Yeah, to translate. Okay, so I think this is the introduction, and then time is for you, so please.
So, selamat pagi. Nama saya Akihiro Harada. Saya profesor di Universitas Osaka. So, from this I will start with English. I'm studying cell polarity and human diseases, making by making knockout mice. All of you know about knockout mice? Do you know knockout mice? Who do not know knockout mice? Yeah. So who knows knockout mice? Raise your hand. So nobody. No one knows. But I will speak very easy topics. So if you don't understand, please stop my talk and ask me anytime. And before going to my talk, thank you very much for giving me this precious opportunity to give a talk in front of a very brilliant looking students. Yeah, I think I know you're very brilliant, but if you have questions, please ask me. So, there are three topics I'd like to talk today. One is those who are not familiar, or those who are not familiar with making knockout mice. I will talk briefly about the technique, how to make knockout mice. And second, I will talk about day of Dr. Noatic. He's a doctoral student in my lab. And he's now working as a postdoctoral fellow. He made a very interesting or very dramatic video of a day of his life, so please enjoy. And lastly, I will talk about the phenotype of knockout mice of genes which is involved in cell polarity. And I have also three take-home messages. First, I have to remind you that making knockout mice is not so difficult. And second, please do not worry about studying in Osaka or in Japan. And the third one, very good traveling is important for temporality and also for human disease. So let me quickly introduce my career. I was graduated from University of Tokyo in 1989 and worked as a resident for nearly 4 years. And after that, I entered the graduate school of Tokyo University, Department of Anatomy. And here, I made knockout mice of microchip associated proteins such as MASU and motor proteins, kinesins or diamonds. And after that, I became independent at Akuma University from 2001, and I went to Akuma University from 2009. And here I'm making and analyzing knockout mice of cerebral disease. And as I said before, the aim of my research is to uncover the mechanism of cerebral using knockout mice. So some of you may wonder why I stick to knockout, because many of you may know that the knockdown technique using small interference RNA is becoming more and more popular. But knockout mouse has its great advantages. Well, here I show you the comparison between knockout and knockdown. Of course, you can completely delete the gene by knockout, so you will reduce the expression to 0%. But if you make a knockdown, it only reduces the expression of the gene, so the expression, some expression may remain when you use knockdown. And second, if you use knockdown using siRNA or shRNA, such oligonucleotide or vector may have some adverse or may have some toxic or may have some effect on other genes than the genes of your interest. It is called off-target effect. So such kind of effect occurs in knockdown, but of course the principle is totally different, so you didn't see any off-target effect by using knockout. And the third, it is relatively easy to make knockout mice using knockout technique, by using conditional knockout technique. But it is rather difficult to use knockdown technique to the whole animal. You can do it, for example, by using virus, but it's not so popular. But the main reason I use knockout is this. You can see very interesting or striking phenotype when you use knockout mice. It is just like looking at the great view from the top of the hill, of the mountain. So you can see the scenery that nobody else has ever seen before. But many of you already know, making knockout mouse requires time and cost and labor cost. But well, in our lab, we can make it simpler by doing some improvements in the procedure. So before going to the technique in detail, I'd like to briefly go through the flow chart to make knockout mice. So here you can see 3 exons. And suppose this is a very important exon. You can make a targeting vector which have a neomycin resistance cassette into this exon. And after making this targeting vector, you can introduce this targeting vector into the embryonic stem cells by electroporation, electric shock. And some of this targeting vector replace the endogenous gene with homologous recombination like this. There's a crossover between this intron and this intron, and finally the cassette will enter the endogenous gene. So, but the problem is the rate of this homologous recombination is very low, less than 1%. So we have to pick up many cells, we have many colonies to find out the homologous recombinant. And after finding out homologous recombinant, you can use it to put them into the blastocyst, the mouse egg, mouse oocyte. Then you can make a chimera. Chimera in this case is two kinds of cold cards. And after you make this chimera, chimeric mice with vital mice, at a certain frequency, you'll be able to get the cysts which have one disrupted gene. So we call it germline transmission. And there are two variants for making knockout mice. One is, I previously said, homologous recombination efficiency is very low. It is said that in your textbook, such as molecular biology of the cell or molecular biology or something else, it may say that 1% or 0.1% is the efficiency of homologous recombination. It's quite low. And the second area is the germline transmission efficiency. The efficiency of a chimera to transmit a gene to the offspring, to the victim, to their child is relatively low, about 1/4 to 1 insert. But this can be improved by using good PSL lines. We can increase this efficiency to half or more than half. So virtually, the only area is this one, homologous recombination efficiency. But we can improve this. So, as I said before, it is said that for in other groups, homologous recombination efficiency is about less than 1%. But for 20 years, I've been doing knockout mice. So after that, I can improve the efficiency to 10% to 80%. So, as you can see, our homologous recombination rate is very high. And usually, when you want to make knockout mice, for technical reason, you need at least around 10 colonies of TS cells. Homologous recombinant TS cells, I mean. So, to do this, you should pick up number of clones or number of colonies, usually 1,000 to 10,000 colonies. It's very huge, it's very laborious. But in the lab, when we want to get homologous recombinant, we just pick up less than 100 colonies. It's very easy. So, by reducing the number of clones, also reduce your time and the cost of the boss and your labor. And much more, your stress. So, as you can easily understand, if you go to other lab, nobody will guarantee you that you can get knockout mice. So, even after picking up 1,000 or 10,000 colony, you're not sure you can get knockout. But in a lab, only picking up 100 colony, you'll be able to get knockout mice. So that's very important for graduate students, because graduate students have to publish paper within 3 or 4 years. So it's very critical problem for graduate students. So I'll tell you in secret about how to increase the homologous recombination efficiency. It's confidential. But it's very easy. Just use neomycin gene with weak enzymatic activity, or use beta gene, which is a fusion gene between beta and delta. Have you ever heard about neomycin? Have you ever heard or have you ever used neomycin cassette? If you use this cassette, please raise your hand. Or have you ever heard it? Some people say yes, some people say no. It's kind of what can I say, gene which makes a cell tolerant to a kind of drug, G418. So, quite simply speaking, if the activity is weak, the cell is rather prone to the dose of G418. But it will also reduce the background, I think, of the unwanted randomly integrated clone. So in any case, when you use weak male beta zero into the homologous region, long homologous region, and short homologous region, and this is a kind of basic structure targeting vector which we use, we can get a very high homologous recombination efficiency. I will show you the simulated example. When you use weak neomycin resistant gene, you can get 1, 2 homologous recombinant. This clone shown by arrow is homologous recombinant. And these are the cells or clones which we picked up. And there are 40 clones totally, and we identify 2 clones as homologous recombinant. So we can get 1 in 7 homologous recombinant from the clones which we pick up. But when we use beta zero, we got even higher efficiency like this. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 out of 14 homologous recombinant without using beta gene. It's quite easy, you know. So you will convince how we get homologous recombinant so easily. So for example, if you know how to make knockout or targeting vector, you can make any kind of vector you like this. It's a kind of example we show the structure of knock-in variant, which means you can insert any kind of gene in the homologous recombinant way to an endogenous gene. In this case, we use M-cherry fused map into this endogenous lab locus together with beta G. And this is FRD, and this is LOXP sequence, which will be cut by cut and ligated with free-base and free recombinase, as shown like this. If you use free-base, FRD is recognized. 2-FRD is recognized, and the free-base cut this side and join the FRD sequence to become like this. This is called Rox variant because it has Rox site here, Rox P site here and here, and it flanks the Rox P site flanks the important exon. So we can make conditional tissue-specific product by this, like this. If you make this mouse with tissue-specific expressing pre-recombinase mice, then you can make knockout mice in a tissue-specific. Do you follow me so far? Okay? Okay? It's also difficult. Okay. So, and this shows how knock-in works. So, in the previous slide here, I knocked in M-cherry lab. I mean, it means M-cherry fused lab, endogenous lab. So instead of expressing endogenous lab gene, we can express this M-cherry fused lab like this. So usually, Golgi is the place where endogenous lab is expressed. So M-cherry reflect quite exactly to the endogenous pattern or expression pattern of endogenous lab. So if you watch this video, you see that these two stainings completely match. And I would like to tell you briefly how long and how to make a local machine around. we can make a targeted vector for knockdown by sequence by PCR. Of course, all of you know PCR, right? It's very easy. And you can sequence. And you can validate them. It depends on people, how clever he or she is. But usually it will be finished within a few months. And you have to screen ESLs like the way I showed you in the previous slide within also a few months. And you can make a chiral heterozygote within a few months. So totally within 1 year you can make a knockout. Well, it may be rather long, but it may be rather short. But. So, have you ever heard about CRISPR-Cas9 technique? Some diligent students may know this technique. Is there anybody who knows about this technique? No? No? It is a much more easy way to make simple knockouts. But we are now trying this technique to make knockout mice, simple knockout mice. But until now, this technique is very a little difficult for making conditional knockout. So, still, if you want to make conditional knockout faster, much faster than you really make from scratch, you can buy ESLs and chimeric mice for conditional knockout mice from Yukon. We have tried the ESLs once or twice, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work. So if you want to get knockout mice, conditional knockout mice, for sure, it's better for you to make knockout mice from scratch, from a target vector. So let me tell you about the day of Dr. It may be more interesting to you. So he introduced how it is like to do a study in Osaka. nobility. And after he failed the test, he can graduate. He could graduate. This spring. And he's a members. Wow. And some party. You know, there's a lot of Indonesian students.
Setiap orang mempunyai mimpi. Mungkin yang tidak memimpi dapat melanjutkan pendidikan berjenjang yang lebih tinggi. Alhamdulillah, saya berkesempatan bersekolah di Osaka University. Saya mendapatkan banyak ilmu dan keuntungan dari sini. Saya berharap kelak ada mahasiswa Indonesia yang melanjutkan kuliah di sini.
He made this all by himself, so it's quite amazing. So in addition to this, I'd like to add some merits to study in Japan compared to the US and Europe. First, tuition and admission fee is rather cheap compared to these countries. About 60 million rupiah, which corresponds to this amount of yen. I think it's 2 times or 3 times higher than tuition fee here, right?
Yeah.
What do you think about it? 2, 3, 4, 3. That's it. So it's not so expensive compared to the United States. Because I heard that at least you have to pay 3 times more than the tuition fee, or at most 6 times. So it's very, very expensive. And good environment. Clean air and clean water. And similarity in culture too. We have tendency to respect all the people. And food I ate so far was so good. I didn't feel any difference or strangeness eating your Indonesian food. So it's very easy to get used to Japanese food. And also friendly. I heard from him that there are 2 mosques near City campus, and many supermarkets serve halal food quite recently because people from Indonesia and other Muslim countries are increasing nowadays. So many shops are beginning to deal with halal food. But of course there are limits. You know, maybe for you, language is the biggest problem. Because when you are in the lab, you don't have any problem speaking to people around you with, in English. But once you go outside the campus, sometimes you have to learn, you have to use Japanese. But there's an international office, there's a good international student office in Osaka University, so they may help you, or the Indonesian people who already came to Osaka University may help you. And sometimes quality of research matters when it comes to Japanese university, but as I will introduce to you later, Osaka, the quality of research in Osaka University is good. So I think there's no problem in the quality of research. So, well, I'll go back to the serious part. So I'd like to introduce you about circularity. And this is how neuron polarized how action is. When you create culture neurons on a plastic dish, one of the neurons become elongated and to be an action practice. So, as you can see from here, neurons are highly polarized, and also epithelial cells. Well, this is a cluster of acial cells of pancreas, which secretes amylase. And this side around here is called apical side, and this side is called lateral side. which I will introduce you in the next slide. But the point is, the cluster is soaked, dipped in a fluorescent solution. So when this cell is secreting something, secretion granule dock and fuse to the plasma membrane. So when secretion granules fuse to the plasma membrane, this fluorescence go into the granule. So this indicates that if you find a bright spot around here, this means that secretion is taking place. So I will run video. So here you can clearly see secretion only occurs on the apical side of the acinar cells. So in other words, so this acinar cell has a polarity on the apical side and plasmatic side. And as I said in the previous movies, epithelial cells and neurons have polarity. Epithelial cells are apical side and lateral side. In the case of intestinal cells, apical side means your lumen of intestine. So your food will go through around here. And on the basolateral side, there are many tissues or, for example, blood vessels here. So this apical side and basolateral side is clearly separated by tight junction or enhanced junction here. And in case of neurons, of course, you know there are dendrites and axons. So they are both highly polarized. To make them polarized, intracellular traffic within the cell is also very important. For example, vesicle from the Golgi apparatus is buried from the Golgi and sorted and buried and transported to the apical plasma membrane. And finally, the vesicle is fused to the apical, for example, intestinal apical side, and secretes the enzymes or hormones to this side, to the apical. The similar kinds of intracellular transport is known to occur also in neurons. So this intracellular transport, called polarized transport, is very important for making and maintaining the polarity of epithelial cells and neurons. And these are the molecules known so far to be involved in polarized transport. There are so many molecules. And we have knocked down almost all of them and found by trying to find what's going on. So, by the way, do you know what it is? Yeah, this is a space station. My friend in Tokyo University became an astronaut. I'm serious. And sent me this picture. This is a view from the space station to the Earth. And do you know what these green things? Yeah, these are all. So if you go up in the sky, you'll be able to see this kind of very beautiful thing. So could we get this kind of beautiful scenery after making lookalike noise? Then the answer, I think, is yes. Because I can make my paper published in Nature about 7 lookalike noise 7 years ago. So I'd like to introduce a little bit about 8 lookalike noise. So RAV8 corresponds to this. So RAV8 is known to be involved in the traffic of vesicles to the lateral traffic. So we tried to confirm that it's true. After making knockout, we feel somewhat disappointed because they are born alive and they got up to for some days. But they seem somewhat unhealthy. I don't know, but they're smaller than white eye. And somehow they're dying around 3 micrometers here. And this orange and the green line shows the knockout ones. Well, the 100 means all of them are right, and 0% means all of them die. So this means that some of them died from around 21 days after birth, and all of them died by 6 weeks after birth. And very interestingly, when we make small intestine specific knockout, the glycosis, the survival curve is quite similar. This means that small intestine is very important for the survival. So we examine small intestine to see what's going on. So this is a cartoon of small intestine. If you got a small intestine, you will see villi here. And as you know, villi is covered with epithelial cells. So please remember this cartoon. This has apical side, upside, and the basolateral side on the bottom, like this. So when we examine the transport of basolateral markers, we didn't see, surprisingly, we didn't see any data, we didn't see any abnormalities. But when we examine apical proteins, like this DPP4, which is peptidase, and alkaline phosphatase, and sucrase, which digests sucrose and peptide transporter, which transmit peptide, are localized quite clearly on the apical plasma membrane like this. But as you can see, in case of knockout, many large amount of proteins are accumulated in the cytoplasm like this. So there must be some defects in apical transport. The opposite side than we expected. And when we look at the enterocytes under electron microscope, do you know this kind of structure? Do you remember? Do you know this kind of structure on the apical side of the tendinous cells? I don't know what to say in Indonesian language, but it is a microvilli. Microvilli. Oh, this is already written here. So you can see clear and long microvilli in the control mice. You can locate it here. But in case of knockout, the length of microvilli gets shorter than unfortunately. Then in addition to this, of course, you find many these kind of active rice factors in the cytoplasm knockout. So this is a summary of what we have found so far, what we explained so far. In case of wild mice, basolateral marker goes to basolateral plasma membrane and distributed like this. And in case of apical marker, they are transported to the apical plasma membrane, especially to the microvilli. And these apical markers are sometimes transporters of some nutrients. That means that this red stuff transmits your nutrients, for example, glucose or peptides through. So it means that if this red green dot is nutrients, for example, glucose, peptides, it can go through this molecule to the cytoplasm like this. But in case of Kawhi-Knockout mice, contrary to our expectation, basolateral proteins goes to the basolateral plasma membrane and distribute normally to surprise. But on the other hand, apical proteins maybe goes to the apical side, but most of them are localized to the lysosomes and degraded in fact. And very few of them are localized on microvilli. So there are not so many transporters which transmit glucose or peptide. So the nutrients like glucose and peptides cannot enter the cell. So can you imagine what happens next? Maybe these mice will die from malabsorption. then that case is correct. Now, very interestingly, until 2 weeks after this is a level of starvation marker. If the level goes up, it means that the mice is starving. So, in 2 weeks after this, knockout and white and mice show similar level of starvation marker. But all of a sudden, the starvation marker increases in 3 weeks after this, in case of knockout. But in case of white and mice, the level is considered to be 2 weeks. And there's additional interesting thing in this one. We sometimes find this kind of very strange structure in the small intestine of mice. It is called microvilli inclusion disease. And this vacuum, large vacuum, has a microvilli. And the microvilli is oriented inward to this vesicle, to this vacuum. And this peculiar structure is called microvilli inclusion body. And this is not the first time this kind of weird structure is observed. Nearly 30 years ago, this structure was found in a human patient called microvilli inclusion disease. It is a hereditary disease, and it's a disease of babies. Babies which have this, who have this disease suffer from moderate diarrhea and die soon. And the prognosis is very bad. It is fatal unless the baby do not get intestinal transplantation. And this final diagnosis is performed by electron microscope by the presence of microvilli shortening or the presence of microvilli inclusion bodies. And this is what microvilli inclusion bodies looks like in patients. This is quite look like the one in our local ones. So we thought that GAG8 may be the responsible gene for this interesting disease. So we stained the intestine of healthy human and patients with wild type with GAG8 antibodies. This is in his chemistry, so GAG8 is shown brown. So in case of normal humans, GAG8 is abundant also the intestine. But in case of patients, there's no stain. So it means that GAG8 is absent, nearly absent in this patient. So we found and summarized these results, and we can publish them in Nature first. And finally, I'd like to talk about our ongoing project about SNAP23 organisms, which shows very interesting phenotype also. SNAP23 corresponds to this protein. So let me summarize, let me repeat the details of polarized transport. After vesicle is carried off from the Golgi, it is transported, and it is transiently anchored on the plasma membrane. And after that, a vesicle is fused to the plasma membrane. So this fusion events is mediated by smear proteins. Do you know something about smear proteins? Yes? No? Yes? Oh, somebody say yes. Do you know Nobel laureates of last year? There are 3 persons who got Nobel Prize last year. And one of them, Jim Rossman, discovered these proteins, which is very important for fusion, which is essential for fusion. And the fusion process is nowadays thought like this. Vesicles have a protein called V-smear, vesicular smear hormone here. And on the side of acceptor membrane, there are P smears. One is syntaxin, and one is not 23. And P smear stands for target smear. And as vesicles approach to the plasma membrane, the 3 proteins form complex like this here. And this complex is called snare complex. If you enlarge this, the snare complex is comprised of V snare in red and T snare in blue or purple. And SNAP23 corresponds to this one. In this slide, it is written that SNAP25 is here, but SNAP23 is a closely related origin to SNAP25. So it is thought that SNAP23 is very important for fusion, so something may happen when we knock out. So when we knock out SNAP23, the whole body, of course, die at very early stages of development. So we want to make a conditional knockout. And we first make a conditional knockout which lacks SNAP23, specifically in islet cells in the pancreas. And the result is here. Usually, as I shown before, islet cells secrete amylase into the apical side like this. We can clearly see the secretion events. Can you see it? Okay? But in case of knockout, conditional knockout islet cells, apical membranes are around here, but very rare events of secretion take place like this. So we can understand that this event is very rare. But very interestingly, when we knock out SNAP23 in beta cell, do you know beta cell? So which secretes insulin. So when we knock out SNAP23 in beta cells, something very interesting happens. So this shows glucose tolerance test. And using 2 different kinds of beta cell specific knockout mice, we show similar phenomenon. Here you can see control wild type mice, which is given a single shot of glucose into the abdomen, intraperitoneal injection of glucose. So the glucose level, blood glucose level, increased around 300 here and here, milligram per deciliter, as usual. But when we make beta cell specific mice, the blood glucose increased only to around 200. So, what do you think about it? I would say yes. So, if the blood glucose is decreasing in knockout, maybe increased secretion may be increased or increase sensitivity may increase, but I will show you only increased secretion. So it means that insulin secretion may be upregulated or the secretion events increased in beta cells. And this is the movie of secretion. In case of control environment, the secretion events is shown by arrows. It doesn't happen so much, so frequently. So we will see anything here. But in case of beta cell specific knockout, you can see the fusion events much more frequently than control here. Here you can see many fusion events. Can you see that? Okay? So it means that when we quantitate the result, fusion frequency is increased to nearly 3-fold higher than control. So this is cartoon hypothesis, what's going on in wild type beta cell and SNAP23 knockout beta cells. So it is considered that SNAP23 and SNAP25 both are expressed in wild type beta cells. And it is also known that SNAP20 complex, snare complex containing SNAP25 is more capable of in this fusion events. So it means when the complex contains SNAP25, the vesicles are much more easy to fuse. But the complex which has SNAP23 is more resistant to fuse. So in case of SNAP23 local beta cells, this SNAP23 is gone, totally gone. So there are only SNAP25 molecules here. So the efficiency of fusion between insulin granule and plasma membrane is increased. So, in other words, when you find a drug which binds to SNAP, specifically to SNAP23, it will increase the secretion of insulin. Don't you think so? And we screen many compounds. And we found 5 compounds were known to be bind to SNAP23 in vitro on the microarray. So we tried to find whether these compounds are capable of enhancing the secretion of insulin in first using Vinci cell, which is the model cell of insulin secretion. So when we use compound number 2, we found the dramatic increase of secreted insulin like this. So we use this compound and we injected this compound into mice. So this is what happened. So from this IPGPT, the maximum glucose level is lower than non-injected control. So it means it works. So actually, when we measure plasma insulin level is actually increased after the injection of this drug. So we are trying to find out, or we are trying to test that it can be used as a drug for humans. But I guess it is not so likely to use this in human because SNAP23 is expressed everywhere. But anyway, it may be used. Lastly, I'd like to talk about the result of neurospecific knockout of SNAP23. This is 2-week-old on mice. It can walk around the floor quite freely like this. But in case of SNAP23 knockout, neurospecific SNAP23 knockout, they are just running around, going around. He or she does not seem to know which is up and which is down. And sometimes they got seizure. Yeah, like this. So in neurological terms, it has a very severe ataxia. So we open up the skull to see what happens. So can you imagine the result? Now please think about it. And the answer is this like this. One type mice, of course, has cerebral cortex and called cerebral here. But as you know, here, in case of neurospecific knockout, the cerebral cortex is very diminished, and in case of cerebral, virtually no cerebral here. So that's why the mice shows severe ataxia, cerebral ataxia. So I'd like to repeat the take-home messages. Making knockout mice is not so difficult. Don't worry about studying Osaka. And lastly, physical traffic is important for temporary and human disease. Sorry, well, we are not so involved in dementia studies so far, but if there's chance, I'd like to restart the dementia study. But so far, our main topic is physical traffic. So So lastly, I'd like to acknowledge the people in Osaka University, especially for Dr. Noatic for making a video and analyzing protein kinase D1, protein kinase D1 and 2 knockout mice, and his wife and son, and for Dr. Kuni for making STAP23 knockout, and Takashi Sato for making brain knockout. And before finishing, I'd like to introduce Osaka University just a bit. So this is an overview of Osaka University. We are very big. Maybe not so big as this university. This university, as I know, is very big. And it is comprised of Toyonaka campus, Mino campus, Sita campus. And the Sita campus is the campus for us, for the medical faculties, and the medical hospital and dental hospital. It is very large, one of the largest research universities. Many undergraduate schools, many graduate schools, and research institutes include infectious studies, medical and dental hospitals, and other things. And it is the largest national university, for example, Tokyo and Kyoto. And it has undergraduates of 15,000 and graduate students of nearly 8,000. And let me talk a little about our history. Our university starts from Ekijiku, which is a private academy of Western science and technology, and which is established by Owa Ogata, 1838. And the unique thing is they use Dutch textbooks, because Netherlands is the only country we communicate in that era. And many, more than 1,000 students came from all over Japan to Ekijuku in Osaka and study many things, and go back to their home country or hometown, and many of them become prominent leaders in modern Japan. Like this. Maybe you know this guy, Yukichi Fukuzawa. He's the founder of Keio University. And but more than that, he's famous as a face of 10,000 buck. Please look at it. This face. Can you recognize this? And please keep that later. And let me go back to the quality of Osaka University. By looking at rankings of Osaka University, as you can see from these institutional rankings and publications in the internet, Osaka University is about third in the whole Japan. 3, 4, and around 50 in the world, as I showed. And let me concentrate on Thomson Reuters Citation Index in the next slide. Here. So, as you tell you before, Osaka University is the third in the overall ranking in Japan. But when you look at each field, for example, in case of immunology, Osaka University is the first in Japan and fourth in the world. And in other kinds of areas, Osaka University is included in the top 5 or top 3 in Japan. And like this, and Kyoto and Tokyo University graph is like this, so it doesn't seem to differ so much. So quite recently, we are going to have 100th anniversary of Osaka University in 2031. So before that, we strive to become a global top 10 university. So for that purpose, we are trying to recruit outstanding students and researchers from all over the world to improve themselves by learning each other. And for that purpose, we are now trying and we are now being more open to foreign students. So if you think to study abroad, please include Osaka University at just one gas station. Thank you for your listening.
Thank you very much for very interesting lecture by Professor Hanada. And yeah, he gave us many new aspects of knockout mice, which is very easy, not very easy, but much more easier to do. And then also the relationship between the KO mice for several knockout genes and some diseases. I think it's very important, very interesting, and again it's open new knowledge for us. And actually, so very again, I will thanks for the very interesting lecture. Okay, for the same session. So, is there any questions? First, we'll open 3 questions for you. Please, you can ask for the KO mice. You can ask for the cell polarity, or you can ask for the studying at Osaka University.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Amelia, and I'm from Neurological Department, Surgical Center Hospital. I'm here because now I'm a resident in the hospital, and my interesting is about human dementia. And one of your research is about knockout mice and the pathophysiology of human dementia. Well, it is stated before that cell polarity can describe the pathophysiology of one of human disease. I want to know whether the cell polarity can also explain the effectiveness of the therapy, especially maybe in human dementia. Can we use the knockout mice to know the effectiveness of the therapy of nutrition for some disease in human? Thank you.
Well, the question is about whether we can use knockout mice for as a model of dementia. So actually, I made knock-in mice for tau protein. Yes. And in frontotemporal dementia, like Parkinson's, TDP, tau gene has missense mutation. So before at the very early stage of my life, I made a knock-in mice of tau, which has human type mutation, missense mutation. But maybe due to the low expression of the missense protein, or the limitation of lifetime in mice, we do see a phenotype. But those who have expressed mutant tau very high in the mice using transgenic mice have the sort of phenotype like NFT, neurofibrillary tau. So it can be used, but just using knockout mice is maybe difficult. Or, for example, if you knock out glycerine, you may be able to get some result, but I don't know that kind of focus. I know, is there any reports describing knockout mice of tau? I did. 20 years ago. Huh? 20 years. And I also published it in Nature. But nothing happened in that case. So tau itself is not so important for neuropolarization, or maybe neurodegenerative diseases. Great. Well, if you have something more, please come to me.
We discuss later with Ustaz. Yeah, because we still have time to discuss with him after this session. So the second question is, okay, please.
Okay, thank you for the chance. My name is Mukhtar Hanafi. I'm coming from the basic medical science and bioethics, Gajah University in semester 1. My question is about, I have 2 questions here. This question is about my question is about the tuition fee of the Osaka University. Okay, as we see that it's about 60 million rupiah when we want to transfer it to rupiah. And I think, yeah, it is actually quite expensive for us. And my question is about the scholarship. So is there any scholarship from the Japanese government, or maybe from the Osaka University itself, for leading the research in there? Okay, thank you.
Well, this kind of matter can be explained from but actually we have a scholarship from Japanese government. When you apply for this SPS scholarship, yeah, you can get high amount of money from Japan. And if there's not so much scholarship taken by yourself, you also can exempt the tuition fee to nothing or cut by half. But if you have scholarship that cover your tuition fee, Osaka University cannot give you a tuition. Exemption. And about the lines. I think you're talking about the strength of lines, right? About C or C57 dark, right? And that's totally depends on your research. If you are a neurologist, you have to be very sensitive to the background of mice, because if you change the mice, you have different results. Because the background, gene background, genetic background is so different between these mice. And if you just want to make local mice, there is a fixed strain, which is usually used for making local mice. 1 to 9. So if you want to do some cell biological research, we don't care so much about the strain. Inbred hybrid, we don't care. Of course, you have to care about the strain if you want to see the behavior of the mice. So behavior is easily affected by that. So that's right.
Good morning, I'm David, student in India. I asked about the association. There is any association between proteasome and STAT23 in pathophysiology of dementia?
About the procedure how to join Osaka University, would you please explain to us about the procedure how to be a postgraduate student in Osaka University? For example, as I got information from our academic staff that after this session, we will just have a chance to get any interview session, and is it just the procedure to get a letter of acceptance from you as the professor, and what is the other requirement for us to be to get the unconditional LOA from your university? As information from our lecturer before, Bapak Dr. Hamid, that actually here in Indonesia we have a very large opportunity to study abroad, as my sponsorship from LPDP to funding our student there, our study there. But the requirement is that we have to get the unconditional LOA first from your university. Thank you.
Are you thinking about procedure to become graduate students or postgraduate students? Postgraduate fellows. That's simply, I think it's very difficult, even for us. Because, well, even better than previously, but our economy is also good. So, Japanese government do not pay a lot for postdoctoral fellows. And if the boss is quite rich, I'm not rich, the lab can pay or hire you as a postdoctoral fellow. So ask, well, which laboratory is the best way to get postdoctoral fellow. But I think it's kind of bet to make somebody become a postdoctoral fellow. Postgraduate. PhD students, sorry. For PhD students, there's a way for you, but well, it's better to have a scholarship, get a scholarship here from TSPS or NEXT or from the Indonesian government, and bring it with you to Japan. Because as I told you before, not many labs are so rich to hire, to pay money for graduate students. Seriously.
What is the requirement and procedure that you have to follow to get an unconditional letter of acceptance from the University of Osaka to be a PhD student?
Maybe we can consider because it is not easy to get the unconditional LOA. So it's depend on the communication community or maybe depend on the many things. So it's not easy to Professor Reda cannot explain this questions now, but maybe later we can just yeah, so usually the government MDB need the LOE. Yeah. Without LOE, we will not consider we have the scholarships. So LOE come first, and then the money later. That's the situation in Okay, any other questions? So just one question for me, Professor. So you said that the efficiency of recombinants will be increased by additional, we add the mention or beta-G, so until very much improved. Yeah. So I want to know what is the mechanisms by which the mention and beta-G increase the HR efficiency.
The main reason for the increment of molecular combinant when you use MGR there is that if you use strong gel, it may be inserted in transcription suitable position or transcription insuitable position. When you use a strong gel, it will be expressed even when it was inserted in the position which is not suitable for transcription. But when you use weak gel, the cells which have enzyme in the transcription suitable position will die because of the low enzymatic activity. That we what we are thinking about. And we use beta-G in the same rational under the same principle. So it just reduces the enzymatic activity of them. Yeah, that's what the reason.
is concerned with the ability itself when we do insert the pathology to the cells, IBDG, and they will check the blue colony and white colony during yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, any questions? If no questions, maybe we can finish the lecture. And again, please give a big applause to we can, after this, we can have a meeting in the next room. So, anybody who interested in discussing with him, Dr. Harada, or studying in Osaka, please you can meet us in the next room. So thank you very much for your attention. Also, Dr. Harada, thank you very much for your lecture. And of course, we hope that you will come again, yeah, to give another lecture in other times. So, yeah, terima kasih, thank you very much. Ya, assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.